Welcome to this Q&A on how to improve your website's accessibility. My name is Amy Lishman. I'm the Head of Member Engagement at Brighton Chamber, and I'm going to be your host for the next 45 minutes or so. I'm delighted to welcome web developer and web accessibility consultant Barry Bloy. Barry is a freelance web developer and has worked on the web for almost 20 years. Specializing in front-end development and accessibility, he wants to make sure that everyone can have a happy web experience, regardless of their abilities and the tech that they might use to access it. I will be asking Barry some prepared questions, all designed to give you the answers you've probably been desperate to ask somebody about how to improve your website's accessibility for people. So let's get started. A very warm welcome, Barry. So we'll get cracking with our first question. So what do we mean when we talk about website accessibility?
Okay, thanks, Amy. Yeah, so to put it simply, when we talk about websites, accessibility is about making our web-based information and services usable by as broad an audience as possible. And it centers around the fact that different people access the web in different ways. So to give you a very sort of early example from my career, I was at a conference in 2005 called That Media up in London. And one of the speakers was named Robin Christopherson, and he happened to be almost entirely blind. And instead of using a screen and mouse, as you know, was sort of the universal way of accessing the web at the time, he used a keyboard and software called a screen reader. And what a screen reader is, it's a sort of text-to-speech software engine that reads out the text and elements on a in computer software, so that a non-sighted user can navigate and use their computer. This was the first time that I'd, and probably the same for most of the people in the auditorium, had witnessed a screen reader in use. And yeah, all my assumptions and things that I'd taken for granted about how people use computers and websites, yeah, I was sort of blown away, and I became very aware of the difficulties that other people could face when using websites. And in particular, he demonstrated using Amazon at the time. Bearing in mind this was back in 2005, I don't think accessibility was very high on their priority list. And he was navigating around the menus and listed products, and instead of just being announced, say the name of categories and things, he was getting lots of odd typographic characters read out. There'd be images with no alt text, so instead his screen reader would read out the file names with long strings of numbers, and it was virtually impossible for him to navigate around. But yeah, no way to skip the navigation. There was just so much just absolute rubbish that he had to kind of navigate his way around to get to the actual content and use this website. Yeah, so I think, as was mentioned in the might have been mentioned in the intro, in the UK, roughly 20% of people have some kind of long-term access need. And according to the US Centre for Disease Control, an estimated 1 in 4 Americans have a disability, with cognitive impairment being the most common type of disabilities in young people. As I mentioned, this might mean that a particular user is a visual user. They might use a screen and a pointer device like a mouse or a touch screen, or they might use the web purely through audio using screen reader software. They might use voice control, or they might use a keyboard or a keyboard-like device to navigate around websites. Yeah, so there are many different and varied reasons why someone might have difficulty using a website. But accessibility isn't just about people with disabilities. An inclusive, accessible design also aids people with temporary impairments. So an example of a temporary impairment, you know, it might be an injury that maybe restricts some of your senses or your movement, and also situational impairments. So situational impairment, you might just be in a noisy environment and you know, not be able to hear a video, which is where captioning, you know, can really help. You could be a feeding parent holding a child, so you've only got the use of one arm, or perhaps English isn't your native language. So the simpler and easier you can, you know, make your website to use and navigate, you know, the more people this benefits, beyond just people with disabilities. But it would be impossible to cater to every individual's needs. So what we have to do is just work to make our content and our services as accessible as possible, by following established best practices and guidelines.
Brilliant. Thanks, Barry. And hopefully, I've heard it talked about, it's a continual journey. There are always improvements to be made. So it's not just that, yeah, one stop and you're done. There's always things to work on. Fantastic. So now moving on now to the benefits. So what are the benefits of improving our website's accessibility? You've mentioned obviously that it is benefiting everyone, but what are the specific business benefits and benefits to the users of doing that?
So the greatest and most obvious benefit is increasing engagement with our websites and reducing bouncing. So bouncing is when people might come to our website and for whatever reason decide to leave. So as we work to reduce frustrations for our visitors, they're more likely to finish processes like buying products, less likely to go elsewhere. As I mentioned, yeah, improving, we're improving the user experience for everyone. So by looking for hurdles that can be reduced or removed, and by streamlining processes and particular user journeys, we're making things easier for everyone. For example, if you take a look at the text on your website and rewrite it to make it more clear and concise and well structured, that's going to benefit everyone. If we look at making forms easier to use, you know, perhaps asking for less information, just making them, you know, simpler to follow, again, that's going to benefit everyone. There's also, there are benefits to the SEO, so the search engine optimization for your website. So a lot of accessibility practices center around using semantic HTML. And by that, I mean using HTML that describes the content. So you're not thinking about, oh, I want it to look like this, or I want this bit of content to look like that. There are other technologies for that. But yeah, by purely using HTML to describe your content, we make our websites, our web pages more clearly structured, and everything better signposted, which helps people navigating with screen readers, also people navigating visually. But it can also help highlight the relevance of your content for searches. It makes it easier for search engine spiders. That's the software that basically indexes websites for search. It helps, yeah, highlight their relevance, and Google will actively flag and encourage sites to fix accessibility issues. So if you use Google Search Console, you may get emails saying, we spotted an accessibility issue. Here's what we recommend you do to fix it. And they actively promote more accessible sites. It's also good to avoid bad publicity, because I'm sure, as we all know, frustrated users or customers often let other people know about it, whether that's through social media or other communities. And yeah, excluding users because of their abilities is never going to, you know, it's never going to be good. It's not going to be a good look. And if inclusivity, excuse me, if inclusivity is one of your brand values, which, you know, I hope it is, then accessibility, yeah, should certainly be a high priority. So yeah, on the whole, I mean, accessibility helps you grow your audience instead of frustrating or turning away existing or potential customers.
Thank you. So what are the qualities that make a website accessible? I think you've alluded to a few of these things here, but have you got kind of a definitive guide of what would make a website accessible?
Yeah, so there are industry standard guidelines relating to web accessibility. They are from the W3C's WAI, which is the World Wide Web Consortium, and their Web Accessibility Initiative. But you don't have to remember all that. They're WCAG or WCAG, which are the guidelines for accessible web content. So they're currently on version 2.1, which was written, or rather was made a recommendation in 2018 to include things like mobile accessibility guidelines for users with low vision or cognitive impairment. And those guidelines are the basis for legislation around the world, including the UK and much of Europe and the United States. And those fall into 3 levels of compliance: A, AA, and AAA. With A being a baseline, AAA being the most stringent, but AA sort of being the most commonly followed. They center around 4 principles with the mnemonic POUR, P-O-U-R. So your web content should be perceivable, meaning users must be able to perceive your web content using one or more senses. For example, you should supply text alternatives for rich or time-based media like images, video, animation, and sound. So for example, if you have a video, it's great to have captions for people who can't hear the audio, alternative text for images, so people who can't see the images might be able to get some context or important information from the image. O stands for operable, which means that users must be able to control the user interface elements of your website. So your content and the functionality of your website must be keyboard accessible. An awful lot of assistive technology basically works like a keyboard or is an adapted form of keyboard, whether that's for a user that might use a stylus in their mouth, might use some kind of eye tracking, or if the user has limited mobility of their hands, they might use a recessed keyboard. Things like that. So keyboard accessibility is a really important aspect of making sure that your website is operable by as many people as possible. You have to make sure that people can use different or using different technology can navigate your website easily. You have to give them time to read and use your website. I'm sure we've all seen on ticket websites where you've got this countdown, so they have to allow plenty of time if there's going to be some kind of time restriction on interactions, because if you had issues with comprehension or reading, 20 minutes might not be enough to go through a sort of purchase process, for instance. You should also avoid content that could lead to seizures in photosensitive users, because, yeah, I mean, what might look like a very grabbing animation could be incredibly dangerous to someone. So the U of poor is for understandable. So this more relates to content, and is your content going to be understandable to your users? Is it readable? Do you need to implement simpler language to make your text more accessible? Also, does the interface of your website work in predictable ways? Do you follow common standards or practices for things like navigation and forms? And can users go back and correct mistakes? If they receive an error, or they've, there's something missing on a form, can they easily go back, correct that mistake and carry on? And the R stands for robust. So what we mean by that is using established web standards to maximize the compatibility of your website and its content with a wide variety of software and devices, including those that don't exist yet. If we write our content and pages to standards, then future devices and software will also be written to those standards, and so there's no worries about operability there. So on the whole, yeah, give plenty of consideration to how your website will work with assistive devices and software. Don't make specific assumptions about how someone might access or use the website. And that applies to technical aspects of the website, as well as to your content itself. Yeah, it's well worth including as part of any content strategy you have to make sure that your text is going to be digestible, accessible, and to make sure that images and rich media have alternatives.
Thanks, Barry. We've had a couple of questions through, which we'll come to at the end, around alternative text, and it's specifically around detail, level of detail. I know a lot of people have used it on social media, but it'd be interesting to hear your perspective in a bit. But we'll move on now to how can we check the accessibility of our website, which really fits in nicely with another question I've just had one through around, is there an accessibility health check on a website? So yeah, what can we do?
Yeah, that fits in perfectly. There are various tools and auditing tools and checkers that we can use. They do tend to cover more technical, more measurable aspects of accessibility. Which is why you might want to also engage in some user testing, so with real world users. And it's always worth having a bit of an accessibility check yourself. So to go into more detail on those things, there's a great tool called Wave, which allows us to check for technical issues. There's a web-based tool, I think it's wave.webaim.org, and there's also a browser extension. So you either load this up on a particular web page, or enter the address of the page that you want to check, and it will produce a list of errors or warnings or notes about things that you might just want to check. And yeah, that's a really useful tool for just getting a very quick look at some issues that you might need to fix. A lot of browsers also have built-in tools that perform a similar function. So Firefox has them built into its developer tools. Chrome has accessibility checks as part of its Lighthouse toolbar, and they can also give you an idea of the document accessibility tree. which sort of breaks your web page down and shows you what text and hints and information are available to assistive technology. So it's a bit more detailed, and it is a bit more of a sort of techie deep dive into it, but can also be quite useful and enlightening to think, you know, how would a screen reader, for example, see this web page? There are tools to check on visual impairments. There are some simulator tools that might give an idea what it's like to use your web page with particular visual impairments, and other tools to check different kinds of color blindness, which I think affects, I think it's somewhere between 1 in 10 and 1 in 12 men in the UK are affected by color blindness. So that's a very useful thing to check. And it's also worth just trying out a screen reader or trying to navigate your website with a keyboard. Although it's worth noting that people who do use assistive devices and software day to day are very used to using those and can use them very fluently. So it will feel very tricky, but I mean, it's very eye-opening. Yeah, just giving those a go and challenging your assumptions. So yeah, user testing. The big advantages are that you're having real-world people look at your websites who may be experienced users of assistive technology. They might have a variety of different needs, so they might find issues or try to do things in ways that you hadn't considered. And as for testing yourself, you could always try viewing your website on different devices or with different software to what you're used to using. You could create your own restrictions. One example I've seen used is to roll up a sheet of paper and try and navigate a site using a very limited field of vision. You can also, there are software tools that might simulate a poor connection to the internet, or you could use a small screen or bump up the text size so you're more restricted in what you can see. You should focus on checking your key user journeys. So for example, if you're a shop, check that the basket and checkout process is accessible. Are there any complicated components, drop downs, or elements like that that you should check? Can they be navigated or used with a screen reader and a keyboard? And if you have dynamic content such as live text or perhaps search results that refresh as you update filters or something like that, make sure that non-sighted users will be alerted to updates to that content. All major operating systems have screen readers built in. So Apple computers and devices have VoiceOver, Windows has Narrator, Android has TalkBack. There are free products, for example, MVDA for Windows, if you'd like to try out a screen reader for yourself.
Brilliant, thank you, Barry. And I will just say anything that's shared, that we've shared on the chat that Barry's mentioned, we'll share afterwards in the follow-up email as well, so you can explore some of these tools and methods as well. So yeah, fantastic. So I mean, you've given us a lot of information there around, you know, what we can do to check. But have you got any advice for our audience today about what we can do to make our website more accessible? You know, what are the first things that you might do as well? Because I'm sure a lot of people on this call will be thinking, great, there's so much we can do, but as business owners or even, you know, people leading marketing teams, what do you have to do first? What's the best thing, and how do you how do you get started and make a difference without just looking at all the things and going, I don't know where to start?
Well, I would say it's it's always going to be much easier to take an accessible approach to building your website from the start than it is trying to fix it later. It's sort of, you know, can be like trying to remove all the raisins from a cake that you've already baked, rather than putting them in the first place. It'll be cheaper, you'll get more consistent results, and it'll encourage good design practice all around. But I think for most people, they'd probably want to make improvements to the current site, look at what can be done there. So I think some of the main areas that you should look at is making sure that your website is easy to comprehend. Is your text digestible? Do you have good color contrast to help, you know, make sure that your text is nice and readable, you know, nothing's too small. And I would suggest avoiding things like auto playing video or audio, in particular for screen reader users. This can drown out the speech from a screen reader, which makes it very difficult for them to find and turn off the offending ad or whatever it is. Make sure that your website's easy to navigate. So are you using descriptive link text, for instance? Say you have an article, 10 accessibility tips. Having 10 accessibility tips as your link text is going to be much more useful than if it just says click here. And with a screen reader, one of the common functions is that you can call up a list of links in the web page, and if your text just says this or click here, it's not going to be very useful. Make sure your forms, so for instance contact forms, are properly labeled. That's a big one. I mean,
what do you mean by, sorry Barry, what do you mean by properly labeled?
So have a label that explains what each field is. It could be first name or email address or something like that.
Yeah.
Often you'll see those missed out, or they're placed inside the form input. So as soon as you start typing, you lose it. And I find I tend to forget which field is which. So I have to go back and check. Or if you use, if you have like the autocomplete function of your browser, I mean, that's another sort of good example about, you know, accessibility benefits radiating outwards. Sometimes your browser will just autofill these elements, but you don't know if it's filled the right ones unless you delete the text and re-enter it. What was that? Yeah. Do your pages and your content have clear headings to help show their structure and hierarchy? This is a really important thing for navigating with a screen reader, because a screen reader is able to produce an outline of a page based on its headings. So use those, yeah, to promote structure and hierarchy, and for navigation, not for their appearance. Do your site or any processes, interactions or forms, do they have a nice, clear, understandable flow, and avoid distractions like auto-playing media and ads, or unnecessary animation. Also make sure that your site is flexible, or that your pages are flexible, so that a user can resize text or zoom in if they're struggling to read text. And provide alternatives. Typically this will be text alternatives to image, audio and video. You might have a transcript to a video, for instance. Don't rely on color alone for the state of something. So if say something is green for on and red for off, a lot of people aren't going to be able to perceive that. So make sure that you also have a text indicator. Yeah, on the whole, give plenty of choice and options to users so that they can use your site in the way that works best for them. And yeah, as you mentioned, with testing, test early and test often, because things do change over time, or with new content, you need to make sure that yeah, your site remains accessible as it develops over time.
Yeah.
Yeah, sort of in summary, I'd say always challenge your own assumptions. Don't assume that everyone uses the web in the same way that you do. And even be your own designated dissenter. Say to yourself, what if I don't have a mouse, or what if I can't see this image? How am I going to use this web page? And very importantly, allow people to get in touch with you easily if they find accessibility problems. So make sure that you have a contact form and contact details that are easy to find and accessible, so they can let you know of any troubles they're having.
Great, thank you. I think this is probably a good time to ask those two questions around alt text, and then also we've had one come in around, you mentioned about making forms simpler and adapting those. So, you know, there are sometimes people are trying to capture a large amount of information on a form. Is there a better way of getting that information? You know, do you split the form into smaller chunks, or is that just compounding the problem? Yeah, how can you still get the information you need but make it accessible?
Yeah, I think that's it. I think the first question is to ask, do I really need all this information? You know, certainly don't make fields mandatory unless you really do need that information. Otherwise, yeah, see if there are ways that you can streamline your forms. As you say, breaking it into sections could make things a lot easier, whether that's, say, headed sections on the page just to make it more digestible, or yeah, going from one page of fields to another. If you have a multi-part form like that, it's a good idea to give a sense of progress as well. So say this is page 1 of 3 or something like that, so that people don't just get frustrated and think this is going to go on forever. You know, I don't have time or energy for this. Yeah, provide some reassurance, give very clear feedback on expected inputs. I mean, how many times do you enter a password for something and then it says, oh, did I not tell you you're supposed to have a number and a symbol? And, you know, if it doesn't tell you that in the first place, that's just going to lead to frustration or very clear errors. Yeah, help people to correct any mistakes, and make sure, yeah, that form submissions are going to be successful. Yeah,
and I guess there's something to be said as well for UX designers that specialize in not just the accessibility part, but making the form that you're trying to fill in, yeah, make everyone be able to do it. Yeah, so it's probably,
yeah, again, I think I say these sorts of refinements benefit everyone, and they can be frustrations for one person but a complete blocker for another.
Yeah. Yeah. And so moving on to talk about alternative text. So lots of people have seen the use of alternative text on social media really, you know, boom, and that's brilliant.
Fantastic.
But I've certainly seen some very detailed alternative text in my time, and some very short, succinct text. Have you got any advice about what's best about the level of detail to go into on websites in particular?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and there have been lots of articles on it, and the short answer is it depends. So on a web page, if you have an image that is, well, perhaps I should explain what alternative text is. So when you embed an image, refer to an image on a web page, as you say, it started appearing in social media as well. You can provide text that gives some information, or yeah, text alternative to the content of the image. On a web page, if the image is purely decorative, then you don't need to provide alternative text for that. Similarly, if it's adjacent to a caption or a heading that shares the purpose of the image, there's no point repeating it. In fact, it will be more annoying to a screen reader user just to hear the same thing read out twice. But what the BBC are particularly good at, and what I'd recommend for things like Instagram, is being very descriptive of particularly where photographs are concerned. Almost create a word picture, and then that gives it gives some rich content to a non-visual user. And another case as well, if you have an image that has text as part of the image, you might want to provide that as the alternative text, especially if it's something quite important, and it can't be provided alongside the image.
Okay.
Yeah, so like I say, it really does depend on the context. But yeah, you might need nothing, or you might want to write actually something very, very descriptive and evocative.
So what I'm hearing from you is, if you're going to do it, make it good. If you need to do it, make it not just a really short description, but make it a rich one that's actually going to be useful for
yeah, I think ask yourself, precisely, ask yourself, if I couldn't see this image, what would be useful? Yeah,
brilliant. Thank you, Barry. And finally, we've had a question come in around well, one is reCAPTCHA accessible, or should you avoid that?
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure on that one, actually. I've certainly heard that it's not very accessible.
We can find out, can't we?
I can't say I've tried to use it with a screen reader or a keyboard myself.
Okay. We'll see if we can get an answer then on that one afterwards. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I never find them, they're not a great user experience to begin with.
Well, there you go. There's the underlying truth. We've had another question come through about WordPress as a platform from an accessibility point of view. So if somebody already has this website, is it sufficiently editable? Is it easy to adjust to make your website more accessible?
Yeah, if you're talking about the front end of the website, the user facing side of the website, absolutely. Yeah, you can always make changes to your theme. I think accessibility is sort of an important part of how WordPress works on the back end. It's certainly something that they put more focus on recently. If you're an actual WordPress user rather than the website user, you know what I mean. So yeah, it doesn't, for a user coming to your website, it doesn't really matter what content management system you might be using, as long as you're able to edit and tailor the markup. Yeah, it's not something that there's sort of necessarily a simple fix for, but yeah, there shouldn't be any problems improving the accessibility if you're using WordPress. Yeah,
thank you. We had a similar question about Wix sites as well, but I presume the same goes for, or not, that face.
Wow, yeah, I suppose in the case of Wix, it's more of because it's less of a customizable thing, more of a sort of what you see is what you get kind of visual builder. Yeah, I'm not sure of the specifics, but I think because it is a visual builder, then the markup is not particularly semantic, because it's got no way really of knowing the purpose of the different sort of content elements that you're presenting. And similarly for things like Squarespace, I mean, they typically allow you to do things like add alternative text for images, and if you wanted to, say, provide a transcript for a video, then that's up to you to provide that content. But yeah, I think a screen reader user might find them a little more difficult to navigate.
Okay.
But yeah, can't say 100%.
Thanks, Barry. Well, we have come up to time, so I just want to ask you one final question. You've already shared a couple of resources that people can go to, but is there anywhere else that you'd recommend for people to find out more about this, about what resources to use?
Yeah, the guidelines that I mentioned, the WCAG guidelines, are maybe a little dry, so but there are plenty of sort of explanations or articles that break those down and maybe give good examples. The Mozilla Developer Network is a good place to look, particularly for sort of the more technical side of accessibility. They're the people, they're an open source software company, and they develop Firefox, among other things. There's AbilityNet, who are a UK-based company that provide training and support. There's WebAIM, which is Web Accessibility in Mind. They're US-based, and they're responsible for the Wave testing tool that I mentioned. There's another agency called Tetralogical, who provide a lot of articles and information and advice. Or even gov.uk, they have a lot of accessibility guidelines, and although they're more intended for internal use, they are very well written, very digestible, and give some great advice, particularly for public sector bodies. So they could be well worth a look for a good sort of overview or a more digestible idea of what you can do or how you can run projects in a more accessible way.
Fantastic, thank you so much. Well, it has reached our time, so I will just say a very big thank you to you, Barry, for sharing your expertise today. I've certainly learned a lot, and I know from some of the questions coming in, I'm sure you've helped answer those burning questions. Thank you again to Barry. Thank you for joining us, and I hope to see you at a chamber event soon. Thanks a lot. Bye everyone.